Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to Drawing with Mr. Sepulveda. I'm Mr. Sepulveda, and today we're going to be doing a little bit of painting. And I got this watercolor field kit that came with 48 brilliant colors, and I wanted to test it out, so I figured with Halloween around the corner, why not just go ahead and kind of draw some like pumpkins or paint some pumpkins. Before this live stream began, I ended up doing a swatch of all the colors that were in this set just to make sure that I kind of had an idea of what the colors are going to look like before I put them down. So if you want to kind of paint along with me, this will be kind of fun, right? I'm using this cold pressed paper. It's a big paper that I got from a jumbo pad from Walmart. Don't know how well it's going to work, but this one might be kind of interesting to figure out. The paper that I used for the swatches, if I can find it, is a watercolor pad that I got from Michael's. Just a little basic 6x9 paper over here. I almost contemplated on doing it on here, but I really wanted to try to come up with two pumpkin designs, and so I thought the bigger paper would be easier, and I've kind of got limited space for here for right now. But if you want to kind of join along with me, you can. This set came with this little mini palette. I'm using a pipette just to kind of spread water wherever I need it. And of course, it also comes with this water brush. I already loaded it with water just to kind of save myself some time, but I've also still have like your traditional like water colored cup, your clean cup of water, and then my dirty cup. And I've got some paper towels here, towels off to the side, just to kind of clean up whatever I need. And then I'll use this palette to kind of mix and match some of the colors that I'm trying to create, okay? Hopefully you guys can hear me. I'm using a different microphone, so if it becomes too low, let me know. I'll just change it. If it's too loud, I'll change that as well. So yeah, so let's kind of go into this. I really wanted to do a Halloween piece, and I figure like a regular pumpkin here, maybe a jack-o'-lantern here. I might change the colors around, maybe give this one a little bit more of a spookier effect with like some fog or some green smoke and whatnot. I'm not a super confident watercolorer, as much as I am a digital drawer, but I figure with my desire to want to become an art teacher at some point in time, I got to become familiar with a lot of different media, and this is one of the ones that I find to be kind of therapeutic, kind of relaxing, and whatnot, okay? So I'm going to go ahead. This one's already loaded with water, but I want to make sure I'm picking out some colors here. I'm thinking I'm going to go traditional, traditional orange. So I might mix and match a couple oranges, and I'm using my palette here, and I'm thinking I might do this lighter version. And I might mix it with a little bit of that, kind of like a hotter orange color. And I might try to mute it out a little bit by adding in a little bit of pink. So I might go with that one right there, okay? So I'm going to mix those onto my palette really quickly. I'm using this bigger end, since this will be primarily just the pumpkin, right? I'm going to go ahead and just kind of load this color onto here. So here we go. Just going to mix in some of this orange. It's kind of peachy looking, which I think I kind of like. In this case, I kind of like it. So we'll just do that, and then we'll add in this, I guess, I wish they had names on here, but I'm just going to call it the hotter orange, just because it's a little bit more punchy than this lighter one. The lighter one's a little bit more peachy. And then we'll add in this pink over here. See if we can mute it out a little bit. I think that kind of does it right there. Then maybe I'll just add in just a little bit more water from my brush just to kind of dilute it a little bit. Because I don't want it to be too poppy from the start. I kind of want to add the colors as I go, right, to make some more vibrancy and things like that. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to add a little bit more of that peachier tone to it. And I think I'm kind of happy with that color. So that's the color I'm going to stick with. For this pumpkin, I'm going to go wet on dry first, and I think I'll do a little bit of wet on wet as I go, and what those techniques are is you're applying wet paint to a dry surface, right, or a dry canvas, right? So that's wet on dry. Once it's wet and I add more wet color to it, that'll be my wet on wet technique right there. Okay. So to start off with this pumpkin, I'm going to kind of think about where the center of this pumpkin is. I'm thinking I'm going to have him down here somewhere. And I'm going to branch this out into almost a ovular rectangle, if that makes sense, right? So I'm kind of making a rectangle, but I'm trying to make it a little bit rounder on both ends. You guys have seen pumpkins and you've seen the ridges to them, right? So that's kind of the feel that I'm trying to get with this. So I've got one of those over here. I'm going to try to do my best, just stick to one brush. I've got several on the side to my right off camera, but I want to see what I can do with just the one brush that came in the set. I'm going to give this a little bit more of a line over here, give it that little bit of a gap, and then I'll kind of do the same thing, except this one's going to be almost like a crescent type of shape. So I want to kind of make this a crescent going up on this side. And I'm going to do the same thing to the other end as well. I'm just going to keep grabbing some more paint over here. And hopefully everyone's having a really wonderful Saturday. Getting ready for the Halloween festivities. I was driving my wife to work this morning and we saw a lot of kids out doing some trunk or treating, right? Which I think is kind of interesting because, you know, growing up in an age where all we did was just go from neighbor's house to neighbor's house in the community. I think it's kind of interesting that we've got trunk or treaters where everyone can kind of meet up in one place. I currently live in an apartment, so I think with stuff like that, I think it's kind of cool for like those types of kids growing up in apartments to be able to do that. But yeah, I can kind of leave it here, but I kind of want to try to pull off a more of a three-dimensional type of look. So I want to go another layer on this side. So another little crescent on this end, just to make it rounder. Same thing over here. I'm just going to get a little bit closer to that line. There we go. And then maybe, excuse me, and then maybe on top, where I think it'll be a little bit rounder, like right before, because we're going to end up putting in the stem. I just want this to be a little bit rounder on these sides, just so when I get to that stem area, it'll make a little bit more sense, okay? So again, just mixing up some colors here, a couple oranges, trying to get more of that peachier tone, because I'm going to layer some color on top of it and try to make it pop out a little bit more. And yeah, and then eventually I'll try to use the other side to kind of get a more spookier jack-o'-lantern. So I'm just kind of practicing here just to get a regular pumpkin kind of done, okay? So while that's still wet, I'm going to go ahead and kind of add in another tone to this. And I kind of want to maybe add in or mix in a little bit of purple. And so I'm going to go ahead and do that real quick. So this is going to be this purple over here. I'm just going to mix in some of that purple onto here. It's going to darken it up a little bit because I want this to be a little bit more of a shadow. And so while it's still wet, it ought to kind of take in to this pumpkin and kind of spread out a little bit. So I'm gonna start off at the bottom, kind of flick it upward just to get the base a little bit darker, okay? And kind of come back here and do the exact same thing to all of these little areas, right? So that we can kind of get this pumpkin looking pretty interesting, okay? I'm gonna do that to all of these edges. Just going to kind of spread that from the bottom up. There we go. It's drying out a little faster than I thought it would, but that's okay. It's part of the experimenting. It's part of the fun. I didn't know how this paper was going to react necessarily, but I think we're doing all right with it. Let's see. So we're going to do that, and we're going to do the same thing from the tops. But I also want to make sure I get it in here so you guys can kind of see that spread a little bit better because that was the last spot I did and it's still a little bit wet. I'm trying to spread in some of these shadowy bits from the top. And we'll kind of have like this strange highlight coming over. And then we'll also end up filling in some of these gaps later. But I need the pumpkin to dry first before I kind of get into it. So I'm just going to kind of push some of this in here. Maybe grab just a little bit more of that purple, mix it in a little bit more, just to kind of push that shadow a little bit more. Because we're going to end up trying to push in more shadows on the next layer. just to provide a little bit more depth, and then we'll end up getting some browns and things like that for our stem of the pumpkin. We'll add in some leaves and things like that as well, some vines, and we'll have a pretty cool looking pumpkin. Okay, so I'm going to do two things right now. First things first, I'm going to let this attempt to dry, and so while it's drying, I'm going to try to get those colors for the stem and the leaf. So I've got two different spots for those on this palette, but I'm also going to think about what kind of colors do I want for my secondary pumpkin, because I can actually work on my second pumpkin while I'm waiting on this to completely dry, because otherwise we'd be sitting here in silence for a good while, right? So I'm going to go ahead and take care of that. I'm looking at my greens. I'm thinking we could do something kind of like this guy right over here, and then maybe mix in either a darker green or maybe one of these dark blues to it, just to kind of give it a little bit more depth, a little bit more punch. But we'll do that once it's a little bit drier. So I'm going to go ahead and put those in. So that one's like my fourth one in and my second one down. So I'm going to go ahead and do some of that. So I'm going to put in the little leaf color. There we go. Gonna add some more of it. Put some more pigment in there. So that's gonna be a fun green to kind of mess with when we do the vines and when we do some of those leaves. Spread that out that way. And then I'm gonna figure out a nice looking brown for the stem, and I'm gonna darken it up as I go. But I think this little guy's a little bit more reddish, but it'll work out nicely, I think. You guys can kind of see that right here as I'm mixing it. I kind of like that color. It's not quite like maroon, but it's kind of there. I don't know. It's got a little bit of that purplish red feel to it with this brown. So I think that'll be kind of a cool start off to the stock, and then I'll darken it up as I go. But yeah, and I'm thinking for the other pumpkin, because I really am trying to think, and as I'm doing this, I'm kind of drying my brush off to the side just to make sure I got some of that excess color off. I'm thinking I might do kind of a background piece for this one, right? So we said we might make it a little bit more on the smoky end. I also realized I dropped some paint on here, so all I got to do is really just kind of wipe it with the dry paper towel and it'll come right off. So I'm thinking maybe something greenish, spooky-ish, but I might have like a bluish, orangey pumpkin. I haven't quite decided on the face of that jack-o'-lantern just yet, but what we could do is kind of go in here, kind of give it a little bit of a background. Like I won't do like a clean border inside of them, but I will just kind of throw in a little bit of color here and there, I think is how I'm going to approach this one, okay? So I'm going to go in with a green tone that looks like this. You guys can't see it there, but I've got it, trust me. So I'm just going to kind of put it right here. This is kind of why I use the pipette. I can just kind of drop in some water over here. I had a larger one somewhere. I don't know what I did with it, but hey, this is kind of what I'll deal with. I've also got a larger brush off to the side that I can kind of use to just put water all over the background, because I really do want to show you kind of like what that wet on wet looks like a little bit differently if we were using it in a background kind of color. If you guys hear little clicking sounds or like slurping sounds, that's my dog in the background just walking around. He's kind of clicking with his nails. Probably got to get those trimmed. But yeah, so I'm thinking something kind of like this, maybe a little bit of like a pinkish purple or something along those lines to kind of add into it. And I think I've got the right type of purple right over here. I'm just going to add a little bit of color to it. Same thing. I'm just going to kind of add that right in here. You guys can kind of see that purple really nicely. So I'm just adding water from my brush because for some reason, I know you saw me use the pipe, but I literally forgot that quickly that I'm using a water brush, which is supposed to save us some time. So we got that right there. All right, so with that being said, I'm just going to go quickly in here. I'm just going to use just a big old flat brush. This one's nothing special, but I'm going to use it to kind of start off a background. I'm going to use my clean water on this. I'm just kind of dipping it, making sure I got enough. And I'm just going to plaster on some water over here. I'm not going to do the whole thing. I'm not going to do a clean border, but I do want to just drop in some water on here. Just I'm being very generous with it as I wipe it down on here. And this way we can kind of get that color to kind of pool in and just kind of spread out. If it becomes too much, we can use a sponge. This set that I'm using comes with a sponge. But along with it, we can always use paper towels and stuff like that. Okay, so I'm just kind of dropping in some color, dropping in color wherever I can, just to kind of give it a different kind of feel, different kind of background element. So I'm just kind of dropping that in right on here. I'm also going to kind of mix it in a little bit here in the middle, as you can kind of see. Gonna add some more greens to it because I don't know what I want to do with it. I kind of want to, I might go darker with more of a gassy kind of feel, like there's some smoke or something kind of coming through here. But we'll kind of play it by ear as we go. I'm just going to keep dropping in some more purple, maybe add in more of that pigment on here, which I kind of like. There we go. Kind of got a little bit better color mixing in here. And I'll add a little bit more on this side, a little bit darker. But I think it's kind of coming out all right. And hopefully if you guys are drawing with me, painting with me, you guys kind of have like a fun feel or a fun time kind of making your own pumpkin designs and stuff like that. And I think I'll add in some more of that pigment as well, just kind of spread it. Just kind of let it do its thing. We're really just exploring on this side more than anything else, just kind of having fun with art. Because it doesn't have to be perfect, right? This is just kind of giving us an idea of what works, what doesn't work as we go throughout. But I'm kind of enjoying this little process as we go throughout it. So I'm kind of digging that. Going to go back to that purple one last time so that I can let this kind of sit and rest. Because I'm thinking our other side for our first original pumpkin is pretty much done. So I'm just going to let this kind of sit here. Just going to fan it out and maybe even just use my water part of my brush and let it fade downward. So there we go. Let me just kind of fade this down as we go. So this way we can kind of fill in some of this, give it some mood, right? Give it some emotion. Kind of spread it upward that way. There we go. Try not to keep those lines in here. So there we go. And then what I'm gonna do, because I just noticed it too, I splattered in some paint, but just like last time, just take a dry paper towel or even a dry end of your brush and kind of do that. You might even be able to just kind of blot throughout here, give it a different feel as well, in case you feel like it's too much pigment, right? Again, it's gonna dry out and then we're gonna add some more, so more color to it, but we kind of leave it like that for right now. So I'm gonna kind of dump that off to the side. I'm gonna move this back over here, back where I had it. Move these paper towels. I kind of dropped my palette. My swatches rather. I didn't drop my palette. I've got my palette right here, but it'll be all right. So we're gonna come back in to this guy because he's completely dry. And what I'm gonna do is I think I'm gonna mix in a little bit of some reddish tones into that orange that I originally had. So I'm gonna do that. So we're gonna add in a little bit of that red to it. Mix that up. There we go. There's the red. And then I'm going to kind of come into it with a little bit of a darker orange. So a little bit more than what I had originally. I'm going to add some water to my palette just to get that color in. There we go. Sounds a little bit more vibrant. Yeah, and this is going to kind of help us out with that depth, right? So I'm going to add in some darker orange over here. I'm going to kind of fill in some of those gaps up top, some of the gaps near the sides. We're just going to kind of spread them outward and downward from each other. We're also going to spread it from the top ends to the bottom. Okay, so we're going to kind of push these guys out. And notice how I'm just filling in some of those gaps. You can choose to keep some of those gaps. Like I might keep some towards the bottom empty. But just for right now, just because of how the color is going to take. And how it's going to leave some things where they are and how it's not going to leave other things. It's going to be a fun like little push and pull with the watercolor. So we're going to kind of do that. We're going to play around a little bit more with it. So I'm just going to kind of keep going up and down. There we go. And you don't have to cover the whole thing like I am, but you definitely can if you want. So I'm going to leave little bits of gaps in here as I go. And with that done, I can kind of go in and just kind of put in that stem, like that stalk bit that I was talking about earlier. And so I'm going to kind of keep it a little bit high over here. And you can kind of see how it seeps in really nicely into that water. I'm just going to kind of flick my brush around. I don't want it to be perfect because most of these stems aren't. So yeah, I'm liking how that's kind of coming out. I'm going to drop in some more of that color, just solid the way it is. There we go. And then once it's dry, I'm going to add in a little bit more of a darker tone to it. So we'll kind of see what that looks like at the end. So I'm liking that stem. I'm liking how it's looking right there. It looks like it's finally taking on the shape. It looks like it's taking on its look. Hey, what's going on, Christopher Smith? Hopefully you're doing well. But yeah, so we've got this stalk, we've got this pumpkin kind of forming. And I think what we can do, and if you're really careful with this, and I'd love to use my liner brush, but I think we've been going with this one aqua brush for so long, we might as well keep going. We're just going to try to make, let me see if I could show you on my napkin. We'll kind of make some little curly cues. Probably doesn't show up as well, but we'll try to make some curly cues. We'll try to make some leaves and stuff like that as we kind of come out of this. So I'm going to try to start here really gently. There we go. Kind of pull that green. And then I'm going to kind of do the same thing here, except we're going to give it a little bit more of a loop and let it kind of cross over. There we go. And chances are I probably should make this a little bit darker, to be honest. But I'm kind of liking the way that it's looking. I really am. So let's kind of do this. We'll add in a leaf shape over here. Kind of pull it, fill it. Kind of giving it a shape to kind of hold a shape, and then we can kind of fill it in with the actual color. So just generic little leaf shapes. We could probably even add in a third one right here. Just kind of holding it. I'm trying to hold my brush in a way where I'm not putting too much weight on it. Because I'm trying to make sure that we can kind of fill it in like that. And then I'm also kind of doing some connecting just like that right over there. Okay. We're going to go ahead and do the same thing on this side. I'm just going to add a leaf on this end. You can kind of see how the watercolor kind of starts to absorb and take it in because it's wet, right? We'll add in a few more. I'm thinking like a long piece going this way. Kind of do it like that. And then I'm going to curve it that way. Because then I can kind of put a few leaves kind of coming off of it. It'll give it a little bit more interest. And I also like the fact that it's asymmetrical, like it's all loaded up a little bit more on the right. I think kind of gives it a little bit more character. I think it looks really nice. That's just kind of my take on it. Don't know what you guys think about it, but I think it looks all right. So I'm going to kind of do that. I'm going to load in some more of this green in here just to give it a little bit more depth. And we will add in darker green tones to it for more contrast. But for right now, we'll just kind of play it as it is, right? Kind of let it go slowly, dry up slowly. I'm adding in some leaves on these ends. There we go. Kind of connect that if I can. But yeah, I think it's looking really nice. It's looking like a pumpkin. We do have to go for a darker green. So I will definitely go ahead and add in a darker tone to this. Because if I add in that darker tone, we can give it some depth, especially while it's wet. I think while it's wet is probably the most important. So I'm going to just kind of drop that in here. You can kind of see that's becoming a little bit darker. I'm going to put that a little bit darker. So it'll start taking in certain areas if I just drop my brush into it. So there we go. We'll leave some parts lighter, we'll leave some parts darker. And then once it's completely dry, we will definitely add in more of this darker tones. And then you'll see how it like really pops it out a little bit more than where it's at. So we're just gonna keep doing the same thing. We're loading the brush up. We are adding in some of this darker tone to the leaves, to that stem, and we're trying to make it pop out the way that it is, you know? But it's looking really good. I'm liking the way that this is turning out. I'm thinking our pumpkin is dry now. Yes, perfect. And so I'm gonna kind of come back to that stem. I'm just gonna clean off my brush real quick. I'm gonna come back to a brown color, like a brown tone. So I'll kind of go darker. I'm gonna add it into the color that I already have, and they're gonna start mixing up. There we go. And we're gonna start flicking in some of this color, some of this texture. So we can kind of get something looking a little different, a little cool looking. You can kind of see I'm putting some texture in it by just putting in some spots. Hopefully you guys can kind of see that. And I'll do the same thing with the pumpkin right about now because I think it's dry enough. So I'm going to add in some more red. I'll actually be a little bit more generous on the red on this one. There we go. Don't want that drying out. We're going to keep mixing it. And I'm adding in the red just to kind of give it a little bit more of a pop. But we can also use it to start dotting up and start giving it a little bit more texture to it. So I'm just kind of lifting up my brush, squiggling it around as I kind of come down onto these areas. And if you want, you can also just kind of smooth it out as you get down to one side. So you can kind of see how this pumpkin is becoming a little bit darker. And then I guess the parts with the light could also show some of that texture. And so we'll kind of just start pressing down, mixing it up, adding in some of those dots as we go. So I'm just going to kind of do some of this, try to let it soak in where I can. And then just kind of have fun again, just kind of explore with it. Spread it out, spread it down, all that good stuff, right? But I think we'll ultimately end up with a pretty cool looking pumpkin, and I'm really happy about it. We might also want to go in with a little bit of purple maybe, just contrasting colors to kind of give it a little bit more shade and stuff like that. But I know I'm going to end up doing like a bluish pumpkin on the other side, so just kind of seeing what this looks like is kind of helping me out, giving me an idea. Like I could have left in more of those cracks, more of those spaces that we had, but chose not to, right? So we could kind of learn from what we're doing as we go. So I'm just going to kind of pull some of this. And again, once it's really dry, I'll probably hit up this part again and make it extra dark so that I can kind of open the pumpkin back up and leave in some of the, like just to make it look a little bit more with depth towards this top area. Because this top area looks like it's lacking it a little bit more than what I thought it was. So we'll kind of play around with that as we come back to it. Okay. This side is dry now, so we can kind of play around with the ideas of what our pumpkin on that side is going to look like. But in order for me to do that, I'm going to have to grab that swatch that fell behind my desk. So just give me one moment, please. All right, so we got it back. It wasn't as hard to get as I thought it was going to be, so that's pretty good. So we got to go a little bit darker, right? A little bit more blues for the pumpkin that I'm thinking of. But again, we'll build it light to dark. So I'm thinking I might go a little bit more on this kind of a blue, and I might mix in some other colors with it and just kind of darken it up. Or I can go the route that I did before with that peachier orange, and then build up to the blues to get it darker. So we'll kind of play with it. I really don't know how I'm going to approach it other than just kind of taking those guesses. So let's go ahead and let's try to make those guesses and try to see what that turns out to look like as we go throughout this, okay? So I'm going to go back to that yeah, I'm gonna try out that peachy orange, and then make my way to that blue again. So we started off with that rectangle. So for any of you guys that missed that beginning part, right, this was the first step. We started off with a peachy-ish rectangle, roundish rectangle for our pumpkins. And then we ended up kind of going into it by giving it a little bit of a gap. So I'm going to try to keep my hand as steady as possible and try to give it a crescent shape right over here. So there's that crescent shape here. This one's looking a little bit more squash-like than gourd-like, right? But you know what? That's okay. It's the way it works for pumpkins, right? Pretty much the same thing. But yeah, so we're going to kind of do this. I'm going to give it a wonky shape, I guess. And I'm going to go another little bit on this side, so kind of darkening it up a little bit. So we got this. I'm going to give it a little bit more of a bottom, I think. And then same thing on this end. We're going to give it a shape. And then we'll fill it in as we go. So that's going to be our pumpkin taking hold, taking shape. And then I told you that I wanted to do like a bluish tone or bluish color. I'm actually going to move this up a little bit because it just kind of fell off. So I'm going to add in some of that. We talked about which blue to use. So I'm going to go ahead and put that blue in. It's kind of the blue, right? I'll mix one up just a little bit darker. And then we're going to put this blue into the pumpkin, right? So kind of see what happens with this color. It'll look muddy. It'll look interesting. Again, we'll try to get it ghastly looking. What I'm thinking I might play around with here is that I can, with this jack-o'-lantern idea, I might, just might, have to come back into it using some ink brushes. So I might make this one a little bit more illustrative than I do the one on the left. So the one on the right might be just a little bit more illustrative. So we got this part, coloring it in. We got, so it's not like fully orange or that full peach color. But I did realize that I forgot to come back here. So let me kind of come back here, kind of make it rounder on the back end, because this is where the back parts are going to go. So we'll kind of dig it in. There we go. So it's got this unique kind of shape over here, which I think is kind of fun. I like the fact that both pumpkins don't look the same. That's just me. Otherwise, art would be boring if all of our art looked the same. Like there'd be no reason for Michelangelo or Da Vinci or anything like that. So yeah, so this is gonna look pretty alright, I think. I'm really excited about this guy right here. So there we go. I'm gonna let that kind of dry off a little bit. Okay, and I think we can kind of come back to our other pumpkin. Let's find out how dry it is. It's still a little bit wet, but I just think we could probably still go over it. So let's find out what happens. I'm going to go a little bit more on the purplish side, and I might mix in some browns, but I want this to pop just a little bit more. There we go. Kind of put that up in there. Put in some browns after. There we go. There we go. So we can kind of pop that in there. I'm going to put in the wrong one. That's all right. And then I'll go back into it with a little bit of a brown type of tone. And so hopefully when I do that, it'll give us a little bit more color pop, a little bit more variety in here. So there we go right there. And I'm also thinking if it is dry enough, in a little bit, I might put in a little bit more indication of those separating lines on the pumpkin itself. So I might have to do that. So let's kind of look. I'm looking at my swatch, and I'm trying to figure out which color might be the best to do it for it. I'm thinking this guy might be the best guy I've got. So we'll try this color out. So take a little bit more of this color together with these guys. So let's see how this takes. All right, so let's try it. Let's try it. Worst thing that could happen is it doesn't work, and that's okay. Got this guy. This guy. I'm going to start spreading in some of this as though it's shading going upward, which means this whole end would be technically this color. Okay. And then we will kind of color in the bottom part and kind of still make out the lines that I had, or the rectangle that I originally started with. So I'm going to kind of do some little flick lines over here. Just kind of spreading it. And then I'll spread it down onto this end. There we go. It's not looking too bad. We kind of fill in some of these gaps. There we go. Keep flicking it, spreading it. And then maybe even get some from the top end as well, kind of coming down. What I really should have done was probably think about where the sun might be hitting, like where the light source is. Because then I could have probably treated this like a regular digital piece. And been like, oh, okay, so if the light's coming from here, the shadow should be over here. Alright. Do that. A little bit more of that original color wouldn't hurt. It'll just darken it up a little bit. There we go. I'm really liking the way this is looking. I'm kind of happy with the way this pumpkin's turning out. Hopefully yours is turning out all right as well. I'm going to go ahead and grab this paper towel real quick because I noticed that I did make a spill. Hopefully we caught it on time. If not, that'll be all right. It's not a big deal. Okay. And I'm going to go into this pumpkin. I know it's still a little bit wet, but I'm going to go into it with a little bit of that blue we were talking about earlier. And we'll kind of see what happens when I do that. So again, we're kind of exploring here. Try to figure out if we can make a fun, like expressive pumpkin that kind of gives us a little bit more of a mood, right? So it's not too bad. I think this is pretty cool. So let's kind of see where this goes. Kind of see where this takes us. Push in some of this color. Pushing it down. Pushing it back up top here. There we go. And I am filling in this gaps a little bit, and I know we've talked about not filling it in, but I think I got an idea for a mood, and that's why I'm leaving the right side a little bit darker. I mean, we did technically just talk about, just a moment ago, about how I probably should have thought about the light source. But I am thinking about the light source now, which hopefully makes sense that the light is coming from the left-hand side. So I'm going to kind of darken this up. And I'm going to treat it like a little bit of line work up here without the technical lines. So we'll kind of do that. I'm going to fill in that gap over here. Because once we get to the stem, it'll look a little bit different. I'm wondering if I keep the same stem color or not. But that'll probably be a last minute decision on my part. Because I didn't think about the stem color for this guy. If he's like a bluish, orangey gourd of pumpkin tooth, right? Let's see. Let's see what we can come up with. Maybe I'll make it like maybe we'll go purple, and then we'll kind of build our way up. So I go lighter to darker over here. So we're going to flick up. There we go. And then maybe we'll keep this side a little bit more boxy. Because again, it's not going to be perfect, right? No pumpkin stem is ever perfect. So it's not too bad. My vines on the other side still seem to be a little too saturated. They're still a little too wet. However, I'm going to still try to attempt this just for the sake of not being on for like several hours on here, okay? So let's see what we can do. If I add in a little bit of this blue. Oh yeah, it's looking good. Blue. Oh yeah, it's just a drop of color, but it literally makes a difference. I love it. There it is. You guys can kind of see that. Ooh. All right, let's see. So we can kind of do this right here. Yep, so some of it's already technically dry, but that's okay. I'll kind of just go over it just so it doesn't look like it's all like dried poorly, I guess. I don't know. So we'll kind of see what that looks like right there. Making this a little bit darker. I think it looks really cool like that. I don't know why. I'm liking it. I'm liking it. All right, so we've got that going on. I'm almost wondering if I give the other pumpkin, the one with the quote-unquote background color, right? If I give it some plant life around it, but we'll kind of see if we can kind of do that with like a brown or something like that, and just kind of mess around with it. So let's just kind of play around with this thing real quick. Probably not the best idea to kind of just guess, but if I keep flicking up a little bit of stuff, might be all right. It'll give me a nice little ground to put them on. Let's see. It's not too bad. It's almost like giving him a nest. I don't know why you would put a pumpkin in a nest, but there you go. Didn't know you needed it, but here it is, right? So we got a pumpkin nest. What'll hatch out of a pumpkin besides a pumpkin spice latte? I don't know. All right, so we'll kind of leave it like that. That's fine. It's weird, but I think I kind of like it. So we have no choice but to leave it. And we're still a little bit wet here, but that's okay. I'm going to just kind of add in a little bit of a darker tone to the stem up top here, just to kind of pass that up. There we go. Pass some of the colors that I had in this actual pumpkin and push it upward. What I might need, a little bit of this darker brown. And I love the way watercolor spreads on itself. It's really awesome. It's one of those mediums that you just don't really control, right? You just kind of have to go with it. And I think that's what makes it fascinating. Just kind of do that. We'll leave the lighter pink towards the light. We'll just kind of put in a little bit of a darker brown down here and down there. Kind of move that green a little bit. but it's looking really good. I'm fairly surprised at how that one on the right is looking. Although I really want to go over it with like an outline and kind of outline a like, I don't know, like a darker color there. Let's see. Running out of water in this brush, but I think it'll be okay. Give me a little bit more of that orange on that side. There we go. And again, if you guys hear water or clicking nails, those are my dogs. Just kind of walking around. And of course, drinking water. So there you go. So let's see. I think we're pretty solid here. I really want to go into the one on the right with some line work, but I need it to dry, and I don't quite have a like hairbrush, not a hairbrush, a blow dry or anything to like just dry it out. I do have this brush that could dry out as long as I keep soaking up the color and just kind of doing it that way, but then it won't dry the way that I need it to. I guess it's the paper, because I don't know if you guys can tell on your end, but the paper is warped. It does warp itself because of the water. Like this one like floats up, that's why that part's drying the way it is. And this has got sinking in down here, so that's why all of this is pooling up. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not an expert in water painting or watercolor, so I don't know why it technically does that. I try to use the tape to kind of just hold it in place. But even then, it kind of just does what it wants, which is fine. It's going to do what it needs to. Just got to be flexible and adapt. But I do want to end up putting in some line work on there. So I think what I'm going to end up doing, again, for the sake of time, because I don't want you to sit here waiting for paint to dry, right? Because that's so exciting. What I'm thinking is, for the thumbnail for this video, I'm going to change it to incorporate the pumpkins that we painted today. And if you guys ended up doing any paintings whatsoever for this pumpkin, please go ahead and send it to my email address. You can find it linked in most of my videos. I don't think I linked it onto this live stream, so I do apologize. I'll try to add it when I change the thumbnail. But if you do have one, yeah, just go ahead and do that. Tell me what your experience was with this. I had fun with the watercolor. I'm thinking in the future I might do another watercolor video, or maybe just another watercolor live stream. Let me know what your thoughts are, or if I should just go back to digital, okay, for our next live stream, because we never did quite finish our Metal Samurai superhero, and he's supposed to be showing up in the next S-Verse video, so I think I'm gonna have to make sure I get on that. All right, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, you all have a wonderful weekend, and I hope you guys enjoy Halloween. And speaking of Halloween, on Tuesday, I've got a Halloween episode where I turn famous Halloween horror characters into superheroes / supervillains. So hopefully you guys like that video, and if you do, drop a like on that one. You all take care of yourselves. Have a good one. Bye-bye.